Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Health Evolution Collective of 2021. And I hope you're well no matter where you are watching, if it's live through my Facebook groups or on replay later on my YouTube channel. But I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you're watching. And I'm very excited today to be chatting with co-founder of Low Carb USA, Pam Devine. Pam, thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you for having me today. I'm very honored, and it's so interesting because I'm used to being on the opposite side of being the host. So
it's such a different experience, isn't it? I know when I'm interviewed, I'm like, I find it much easier being on this side than your side.
sometimes, it's funny to switch roles, and I'm like, why does anybody want to hear from me? Okay, which is nice. Thank you for anybody who's joining us and is listening to my story. I hope it inspires you and gives you a little bit of something what we're here today for.
Beautiful. And Pam's actually happy to answer any questions. So if you're watching live and you have any questions for her, please feel free to post them in the comments and we can get to them at the end of the chat. So firstly, Pam, I would love to know what inspired you to, with your partner, Doug, start Low Carb USA.
It's so interesting when I think back. It seems like such a long time ago. And it was an interesting turn of developments. Like we had been in, I've always seemed to pay attention to what I'm eating, but I always had a big sweet tooth. And I did all the traditional things wrong when I thought I was eating healthy. I was eating oatmeal in the morning and all of the things that we thought we were doing correctly for better health and wellness. And I was still putting on weight, even though I worked out, I felt like more than most of the people that I knew. Not as much as some other people that I knew because we were really involved in a running club with a lot of people who ran marathons, and I never quite got that far. We're very involved in a martial arts program that was sometimes 3 days a week for us. And running 2 or 3 days a week. So we were very active, and I was in a very stressful job though. And I was commuting in the car for 30 to 45 minutes a day. And I was sitting at my desk for many hours of the day. And I was slowly putting on more weight. I had just started menopause, and I couldn't figure out what to eat. It was so confusing to me. Doug I'd say, what do you want to get for lunch? We work together. We've worked together for many, many years, like almost a decade now. Lived together, work together, play together, work out together, everything. But we had been in this stressful job, and I'd say, okay, I'm going to run out to lunch. And I really want to go over to this one place because they have really more healthy food, more fresh, homemade. They'd have brown rice and nice salmon and vegetables. And he'd say, I need you to come back. Can you just go to the quick deli? And I'd say, sure, I'll go to the deli. What do you want? Just a burger. And he'd always get the same thing, this burger on a white bun. It wasn't a nice patty I don't even know what was in that meat. It probably wasn't even 100% beef, but it could have been. And I would be like, okay, I'll get a tuna sandwich on wheat and, something like that. But still putting on weight. And he was eating kind of junk. Like pizza was the easiest alternative outside of the burger. And through the reason why we had gotten involved in the running club in the first place is we were kind of involved in sports nutrition recommendation, and we had some products that we really enjoyed that we brought and introduced to the community locally here. And through that community and through that company, we had stayed in contact with some people, and they actually sent us some information on and you may have seen in Australia, some exogenous ketones, something that you would drink. That's a ketone body in a drink, beta hydroxybutyrate mixed into a flavored drink or something. And we were like, what is this? So it sent Doug, who's an engineer, down a rabbit hole very quickly. He's like, what is this? It said ketones is an alternative source of fuel than glucose. And he was perplexed. Being a long distance runner for many, many years, he was like, I don't understand. What is this? So he started looking at it. And then he quickly found Jeff Follick and Steve Finney's book on the low carb, art and science of low carb for performance, and then the one for lifestyle. And this is 2015, in the summer of 2015. He started reading that, some articles. He may have come across the New Atkins for the New You, which is Eric Westman and Jimmy Moore, back at that time in Keto Clarity in 2015, and some articles. And then he kind of said about 2 weeks into reading all the stuff, reading the science, trying to understand what does that mean, ketones as an alternative source than glucose, and learning that you didn't need an external source of them, that you could come to this ketogenic state, fasting and limiting carbohydrates, and a little bit of what that meant. But we had to learn along the way where our carbohydrate sources would be coming from. He had immediately, about 2 weeks in, said, we're going to the grocery store and I've got a list. And I had to say, wait a minute, you're going to the grocery store and you've made a list? Like, wait a minute, what's going on in the world? So, and on the list is bacon, butter, full fat cream, full fat sour cream. There was a lot of dairy, but meats and these kind of vegetables, green leafy vegetables, and I go back to the dairy, the full fat Greek yogurt. Impossible to find at that time. I don't know if you guys are the same in our grocery stores and the ones in Australia. I think they are, because I've been a couple of times in Australia in the last few years. The wall of low fat flavored yogurt. And then at the very bottom, there's one large thing of maybe 5% fat Greek yogurt that I finally found after a while.
Yeah. It's getting better. It's getting better.
It is getting better. Thank heavens. And, it's interesting how things have evolved. And how long have you been introduced to a low carb ketogenic diet lifestyle?
About 7 years, 7.5 years.
So you've gone before me and seen the transition and the finding things. Some of it's good. Some of it isn't so great, because there's the keto products and the low carb products, and you're like, I don't really love the ingredients in this, and please stop confusing people. But
you definitely got more of that now than there was 7 years ago. 100%, because people can make money off it now too. So there's that.
There's even because there's even a brand of cake mix that's been around for decades that I've known since I was a kid, and they have a low carb keto mix, and I was like, what is in this? Because I'd seen it before, and I finally saw it in the store the other day, and it's not that bad, actually. It's not. I would like something, I can't remember, there was probably a couple things in it that I wouldn't want, maltodextrin being one. There's always the one thing that I'm looking for, and please don't put rice flour and any other kind of dextrose or funny flours and fillers and stuff, but and I can't remember the sweetener they used. But anyway, I digress. We went to the grocery store. We started implementing a low carb ketogenic diet for ourselves. And there were still some things that we were not really sure about what we were eating. And I would say, Doug always says he's the kind of person that goes full on and 100% in. So he didn't do some of the things that I did, because I really was questioning. I was like, wait a minute. We're not going to eat oatmeal anymore. We're not going to eat, because, my breakfast was either oatmeal or like a granola muesli kind of bar with nuts and maybe some fruit. And they usually had some sweetener in them, a banana, and the low fat yogurt I was just mentioning, depending on how hungry I was. And I was still using like a sweetened chocolate in my coffee, and low fat milk and low fat everything. So I probably took me a few weeks to kind of wean off of some things. I was at the point of, I don't want to waste food. I'm not sure if I can give up bananas yet, that kind of thing, So anybody who's watching this, who's just beginning, it's not a bad thing to do things gradually. I started cutting out sugar, and I don't think I was drinking soda at that time anyway. I should probably make sure my phone's off now that you're beeping.
Sorry.
No, don't even worry about it. I had meant to do it before. Because I was still trying to figure out how I was going to do it. So, I cut out some fruit juice and some sweetened, started maybe using a sugar-free sweetener, and, Starbucks would usually use sucralose and stuff. So we still do that occasionally even. And then we were still eating beans. I was still eating hummus and beans in my salad, and I didn't realize that they're a very starchy, higher carb vegetable. And I didn't understand it at first. We were in our summertime, so we got a big watermelon thinking that that was a low carb fruit. And depending on how sweet it is and the time of year it was picked, it could be lower in sugar than at other times of the year, or maybe how much you eat of it. But it was interesting. So, and then about 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks in, we started talking about it. There were people at work who saw us changing what we were eating. So some of those people knew, and then we started telling other people about it. Doug's mom specifically, she was in South Africa at the time still, 5 years ago, and she's since immigrated to Perth in Australia. Doug's whole immediate family is all in Australia, by the way. If we have time, we can get to that. How lovely. We love Australia. We've been a couple of times now. We were supposed to go again this coming April after a Hawaii event that's been canceled. So who knows what this April will be, but we won't be, unfortunately, coming to Australia. But we had talked to her on the phone in South Africa. We tried to do it often. And Doug says, I fessed up that what we were doing. We were doing this, changing what we were eating. And she says, that sounds like the Tim Noakes diet. And Doug's ears went, the what?
Wow.
Wait a minute. So he hadn't seen or come across the fact that Tim Noakes had been doing this yet. And he's his running idol. Absolute running idol. So while we're on the phone with him, of course, we're Googling, and he's Googling Tim Noakes and low carb, and Banting comes up, and he comes across the work that he was doing at the time with a chef. And then I think that's the time.
Was it John O'Proudfoot? John O'Proudfoot?
Yeah, the real revolution stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first start into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Study was through that one.
Oh yeah. So they had a great online website that we've came across a lot of things that we hadn't realized. They're one of the first red, green, yellow lists that we had seen. Red, green, yellow, red, orange, green, or something like that. The real green, everything on this list is okay, is all low carb. Orange list, yellow list sometimes, and try to avoid everything on the red list. And they had great recipes on the site, and they ended up having, I'll tell you that in a second. When he started looking up Tim Noakes, we actually found Low Carb Down Under conferences online, conference videos online. So he started listening to a lot of those, and then that's where he learned more of the people who are expert in the field. And then there was a South African conference as well with Tim Noakes in Cape Town, and a few many speakers, a lot of the American ones like Eric Westman and probably Steve Finney, Jeff Follick attended those. So we started listening to those, and he found The Serial Killers, the movie, Cereal, Serial Killers, the movie. And I think that was something that grabbed my attention because it was in a movie form. It was in front of me. It was playing. I was been doing some things around in my kitchen, and I was listening. Like I always say to Doug, are you reading more about low carb and ketogenic diet? And he'd say, yes. And I was like, are you supposed to be doing the other work? He's like, yeah, but I'm going to finish this. And then the movie was on, and it really grabbed my attention. The first one was Donald going through what is a low carb ketogenic diet? What do I eat on it? How do I shop for it? Some of the things that we had started with, and he was going into open markets and buying nice eggs, free range, beautiful eggs, and cooking them, and then exercising to test how he felt, and then reporting about, how he felt and what the food was like. Was he hungry? What was his cravings like? Was he energetic? And it was fascinating. And then I think we went into Serial Killers 2, the one where Sami Inkinen is a world-class triathlete. And, Doug could resonate being a long-distance runner with him, long-distance biking and running and swimming. And Doug neither one of us ever came to a realization that we were insulin resistant or pre-diabetic. We don't remember having our A1Cs checked early on that we would have gotten any warning signals. So we weren't in the sickness camp yet, but we were in that we're both slowly putting on weight, even though we're very active. Like a lot of people are very confused about what kind of food to eat. And he listened and watched Sami Inkinen and his story, because he was diagnosed with pre-diabetes, and I think he got to the point where he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, where his A1C was over what is now the definition of over 6.5. But most of us who are learning over the years that we really don't ever want to get over 5.5 if we can help it and be pre-diabetic, because a lot of the damage is already being done to the tissues. And we were watching his story, and they rode from the San Francisco, California coast to Hawaii with him and his wife. And it went back and forth with Steve Finney and talking about the science and monitoring him. Steve Finney was part of his team, monitoring his oxygen levels, monitoring his output and input and oxygen levels and all that. It was fascinating. And at the end of the movie, Tim Noakes said, "We're changing the way the world eats, one meal at a time." And I was like, chills. And I was like, how could we, I just got chills. How could we ever play a small part in helping bring awareness to this? How could we play a part of doing that, which I think a lot of us end up wanting to share information that we think is really hard for people to get or find. And you're probably the same, right? You get to the point where you're like, I really want to help people, and not a lot of people are getting the right information. So that was probably around the time when the Real Meal Revolution started a coaching training program, and Doug applied for it. But they weren't ready to take an international student. And he was so devastated that he didn't get accepted into this coaching training program. And so he is one that says, if I can't get someone to oversee what I'm doing, I'm going to do it myself. And he developed a whole coaching program on when we developed a website. And at the same time, while he was doing that, I had written to RMR, and I kind of said, it's really, maybe you could reconsider. It would be a real shame if you didn't get someone as dedicated as Doug, who really wants to help people. He's going to be a very big advocate for you. And, but in the meantime, maybe we'll try to do something ourselves, and we might even host a conference and invite the experts to come and speak in our town. We had, in our job was a startup tech company that I was the event planner, and Doug was actually the one that implemented the audio visual stuff. It had a lot to do with insurance agents and training and stuff like that. It was a completely different field, but we knew how to get the venue. He knew how to run the audio visual, make sure that slides were up and people could hear, and the timing of the stuff went. And I did all the marketing, and I did all the registration. So we still have the same roles here in Low Carb USA, because in January of 2016, we did decide to invite all the people to come to our town. And it was just fascinating. It was his 50th birthday, the end of January. It's coming up now, 2021, in a couple of weeks. And the people in our work didn't understand really what we were doing. And we were ready to start making a transition anyway. They were drinking beer and eating all the funky appetizers, normal pub food. And we were like, what can we get? Chicken wings and whatever we were doing. And then they all had to go. And we were just talking about what we had learned over the last few months, what we were seeing, what we wanted to do. And Doug had said, maybe we should invite people to come. And I woke up in the morning and the next day, and he said, I just wrote to like 10 people. I said, are you kidding me? And invited them to see if we put on something, would they come? And they did. They all said yes. And I'll introduce you to this person.
And so had you decided had Low Carb USA been in, did you give it that name then, or did you call it something else when you first did it?
We hadn't called it anything yet. It was just kind of like, what should we do? What should we call it? And Doug was like, have you called the hotels yet? I'm like, what? Wow. We had no website. We had no name. It was Pam and Doug and an invitation to a bunch of people. Eric Westman and Jeff Gerber, and I think he wrote to Jimmy Moore, and Jimmy Moore introduced him to a bunch of people that he had known that had spoken. And we contacted Michael Eads. He's been doing this for decades, Protein Power. And we got on the phone with him, and he was like, have you talked to this person? Have you talked to that person? I can introduce you to this one. They're doing amazing work in this space. And I'm taking notes. And Doug's mind is going like this. He's like, and for about the next 5 months, the schedule was in his head and like what it would look like. And in the end, we just had the top people in the space come and present. So many of the tops. You never get to have all of them all in one space because we only have 4 days and so many hours in the day. And by the end of a 4-day weekend, everybody's mind is like crammed full of all this information, but so in such a good way. And we adjusted a few things, but we just jumped in, and we didn't have any idea how we were going to pay for it. And we didn't have any idea how much expensive it is. Nothing's ever been fully covered. And I can just tell anybody right now, we've never made a profit on an event. If people think we're raking in the money based on whatever ticket cost sales are, that's just not. This is a labor of love. And it is just so inspiring to us when we get to meet people in person. And I'm so sad that we're still not able to do that. But our virtual event that we did this past summer that had to go virtual, called our San Diego event, but people were able to dial in from all over the world that may not have been able to travel. And we had a great turnout. We did this, one-on-one. We record we'll do the same thing for our winter conference that's coming up in 2 weeks. And thank you for highlighting that for everybody, because it's just an invaluable learning tool for so many people who want to have those videos and have those presentations and have the science and the clinical things, results laid out, and the inspiration. It just inspires me every single time to go back to, hearing people's stories. We've had to do it by chat and social media, and we do that anyway, right? You do that all the time anyway. On your page, you share information and people share stories with you and you interview them. And we have a blog and a podcast as well, that there are such powerful stories of healing, and that just blow my mind that people aren't getting the information from their medical professional. We originally went into thinking we were, like we were saying, creating a coaching program and teaching one-on-one. And we quickly began to realize that the medical professional was the person that we needed to have the goal of reaching, because they're not learning nutrition in school. They're not learning to address patients a little bit differently who need to be, or, to really individualize treatments. And they're learning a lot of, and I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, but in a way to raise awareness that our medical practitioners, our doctors, our PAs, nurses, nurse practitioners, dietitians are learning a set program, and they're not learning nutrition and how nutrition, often not learning how nutrition affects our whole body and our well-being. Not understanding what insulin resistance is and how it develops, not understanding what type 2 diabetes and how it develops. Because if we can help it, and you're part of the message, this whole community is part of a growing message to let people know and give people hope, doctors and patients alike, that type 2 diabetes is not chronic and progressive. It is not something that you're destined to have all these complications like your mother had, or your grandmother that you had to watch because her doctor didn't understand that it wasn't chronic and progressive, that the only way to treat type 2 diabetes was to manage blood sugar with medication. And it's such a shame. It brings me to tears when I hear people talk about they were in a dietetic program and they were visiting a wound care center, and it's like a battleground, a diabetic wound care center where people haven't been given options and information, that they're now on a bed losing limbs and toes, feet, limbs to gangrene because they're not having circulation into their feet and hands sometimes, and losing their eyesight and having kidney damage. It's just devastating. It's one thing if someone's given the information and they make the choice that they don't want to do something. It's one thing for people to be given the information and choose not to use it. But it's another thing for people not to be given information, especially if they really want it. Because I know people we were talking about earlier who are looking for a healthcare professional to understand their personal situation. And they know low carb can and will help. But that healthcare professional is still saying, no, it doesn't really matter if you don't eat carbs or gluten or bread or pasta or potatoes or sweet potatoes. It's not, you just need medication or something like this. And it's so frustrating.
Yeah. Wow. A few things I'd love to sort of, I guess, pick up on. What a phenomenal feeling it must have been when you finished 2016, that first conference. I mean, you must have been on a high for, are you still on a high?
Yeah, I think it's kept going, honestly.
Yeah.
We didn't know how we were going to get out of the hotel and pay for it. And we were very stressed out about it. And we weren't really sure. We were like, people are coming. But the first time we heard, I'm talking about specific stories, even from that very first one. So there's a gal up in Washington. She's now since moved to Arizona. We've known her for 5 years. She goes by Keto Carol Freeman. She had a very serious car accident. And chronic pain and chronic inflammation is something that's not often talked about in association with any beneficial healing from dietary changes. Unfortunately, poor Carol had a traumatic brain injury and a trauma syndrome, an entire body trauma inflammatory syndrome where she was getting fevers, all of this pain and inflammation, and she didn't understand it. She got misdiagnosed many times until she finally found the ketogenic diet. And I think it was because she had some brain symptoms that she said, and I've heard this many times, I've heard the ketogenic diet can help with epilepsy. Maybe this will help me. I'm going to try it. And her results were astounding and quite quick to start the healing process and feeling better. She was one of the first stories that I heard. Another one was we had a group of people who had written to us before the conference. One of them says, I can't believe you're coming to my town and you're right down the street from where I live and work. Her son had a rare disease where it's called glycogen storage disease. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's where there is there's a problem with the way muscles store and use glycogen. And it's a rare disease, and there's few different stages of it, or I should say levels of it, because there's stage 1, there's different names for different components of people who have different symptoms of it. Some are worse than others. But her son was quite young, and he had found a ketogenic diet. His body can use ketones for fuel when it can't use glucose for fuel very well. And he was now getting into high school, and he was able to travel and go on a walk in England with somebody who had helped him or gotten to know him, who invited him. And there was a doctor, she's a doctor herself in Canada, who had struggled for so many years, gotten herself through med school, but still had to figure out this way to get her body to move when it wasn't using glucose very well. And it was a struggle every day until she found a ketogenic diet that was really helpful for her. She was even running. For a runner who isn't able to use glucose in her muscles, but can use ketones, fascinating. There was a woman who came from Sweden. Her daughter also had, or her son also had, and then there was another gentleman from Texas. They came to the 2016 conference, told their story. I think Stacy, the doctor from Canada, got up and told the story. And I was like, look at, there's researchers in the audience that maybe they can do more research on this, because there's talk in the community, there are examples in the community, but not everybody understands or believes it. And like the type 1 diabetes community and the epilepsy community, who's telling them and giving them information? Are the parents going to try it? Are the individuals going to try it without science or backing it up? So Eric Westman was in the audience with a dietitian who had come from Scotland, and they ended up doing a case study and publishing it within about 8 months. And I was like, look at what happened just by all these people coming together. There's a case study being written, and this could help who knows how many people come out of this. So this happens after every conference though now. And I find it so humbling and just crazy that we can bring people together to teach, bring awareness, educate, collaborate, and then they do stuff like that and collaborate together. People often work together later. It's really incredible.
That's the stuff of, passion and life, and I love it. And, I hear what you're saying around, you do it because you love it. And there's something deep that drives people, like yourself, I think, to do it, to just share. When so many people who do share, and I certainly, for me, it was my own personal journey that led me here. And it's kind of like, well, you can't unsee what you've seen. And it is exactly what you say. It's not about saying this is the only way, this is the right way, but it's saying, look, these are the options. And, I find it devastating, like you said, that, we don't get given all the options. Now, if we get the options and people decide that it's not right for them or they don't want to do it, well, that's their choice. But to not even be given this as an option is devastating. And I think you're right. I look at my mum, it wasn't until 72, 73 that I found this so I could help her and give her the options when, she was in a very, very bad place metabolically, and she's been able to turn that around, in her mid 70s. But had she passed away and I not had that option, it's a deep passion that drives people like yourself to do it. And, I think so many people are just so grateful that you do it. And I financially it isn't easy. And I know this is your second job, really, isn't it? You've got to do another job to pay the bills.
We've actually gone full time into this. And so we've made a lot of sacrifices. We rented a really small condo in a place that we just didn't want to stay at as long as we did, but we did. We have never done another job. We quit our job very shortly after we started Low Carb USA. So, and we just learned how to live really simply, with just what we needed, the kind of food that we wanted to eat. It wasn't always grass-fed grain, it wasn't always grass-fed beef. It wasn't always really high-level pasture-raised egg, that kind of stuff. But good low-carb meat that we buy on sale, and we're nourishing our body, and we know we could maybe do it a little bit better if we could. But we've learned even from our friend Peter Ballerstedt that maybe that grass-fed beef isn't exactly that much better than everybody always says it is. And he's a good reminder. He teaches us all the conferences that we go to, and the people that come and present teach us a little something that help us make decisions, that we can decide for ourselves what we want to do, where we want to spend our money, what we want to put in our bodies. And yeah, we've been doing this full time. Now, you were just talking about something, and so many things just came up in my head, but one of the really important things that I want to talk about is some of the people that we met over the years, so many of the doctors that we've met. And let me think about what you just said. Many of them are wounded healers. We've actually had someone coin that phrase lately, a wounded healer. They were the person who was also putting on weight themselves, doing all the stuff that they had been recommending to their patients, and it wasn't working for them. And they knew in their heart of hearts, I'm trying to do all this stuff, and I'm telling my patients to do all this stuff, and we're all continuing to put on weight. Our blood sugar levels are out of control still. We're having to increase our medications if we're already on medication. Maybe we haven't got there yet, but they're trying to heed their own advice, and they're still having these problems. Dr. Brian Lenskes and Dr. Trokalasian are one of them that come to mind, the Low Carb MD podcast. If anybody hasn't started listening to that yet, such a good one. Brian has become such a very close friend of ours. They're actually literally 20, 30 minutes away from us. And we're so lucky they're here locally. And I say lucky because I think we came together because our conference was here locally in 2017. Dr. Brian Lenska's office was literally 4 blocks away from where the conference was going to be held downtown San Diego. And he said, oh, and I can get CMEs. And I really, I need to fulfill my CME requirement for my licensing, continuing medical education, if anybody doesn't know what that is. And I'm going to go, I've learned some things. He had started probably listening to Jason Fung and fasting and the obesity code. And he hadn't written diabetes code yet. But realizing that insulin resistance was a real big component of his personal weight gain, even though he tried to hike as much as he could and watch what he was eating. And, his stress levels were really high, being a very successful, very well thought of physician here locally in San Diego. And he came to the conference, and one of the things that always blows my mind too is there's so many other parts of health and wellness and well-being that the low carb ketogenic diet addressing metabolic health and insulin resistance can help with. We get neurologic stories, not just epilepsy, but PTSD, Parkinson's and MS, where they're still trying to figure those out a little bit more and get more studies done, but mental health. And that's another area that we always try to bring in now as we've gotten more and more mental health, got to know more and more psychiatrists, psychologists, and those doing work with addiction. Mm-hmm. We always try to bring that into our conferences now, and it's made such a huge difference. And I think our medical professionals, once they understand the addictive component, they understand where the struggle is with some people that we're like, can't ever think, how am I going to give up A, B, or C, whether it's bread, sweets, pasta, whatever it is. There's an addictive component. So there's almost half of an entire day of the 3 days that's coming up for Boca that has processed food addiction, carbohydrate addiction, food addiction talk. Wow. And it's really powerful to make sure that people understand the addictive component. Joan Iflin talks about activating the centers of our brain that are reward centers, dopamine and serotonin. Dr. Rob Sivas always talks about emotional management strategies as well to figure out how to manage our behaviors, not drown our sorrows or our stress with food and stress eating and sorrowful eating. To be mindful and to go for a walk if you feel stressed and not pick up, whatever it is that you might reach for. But also the reward part of doing something to do it, not just to be really good at it. Or, he's always the one that talks about don't play a sport to win. Although our society is Australia and South Africa, how much do they not like each other because they have to win, right? We all know the sporting behavior of wanting to be number one. And so he talks a lot about that. Just, with working with clients and us meeting people all the time, that everybody always talks about, I don't know, I can't say everybody, but almost everybody says they feel better when they're not on a blood sugar roller coaster. And for me, that was one of my biggest takeaways and aha moments when not only could I go longer periods of time before I broke my fast, and my breakfast was not the very first thing I thought of in the morning, that I could, the first time I ever went to 3:00 in the afternoon and hadn't eaten, I was like, I haven't eaten. I said, Doug, I haven't eaten today yet. And he's like, that's good. And I'm like, that's crazy. And, not having that blood sugar crash and feeling shaky and anxious. And I'm going to, panic if I don't get something, which was usually every morning when I had oatmeal and banana and low-fat yogurt and a coffee with sugar in it. By 10:00, I was dying. I'm like, I have to go get hard-boiled eggs across the way. And he's like, why do you want eggs? I'm like, it was that protein-fat combination that I needed for my brain to function. I often at that time in the morning didn't necessarily think I need more sugar or I need more cookies or, I need more granola bars. My body was telling me what I did need was protein and fat. which was good that my body was at least telling me that. But there's a lot of people who'll be like, I need another cookie or I need another granola bar. And it just goes and goes and goes. By the afternoon, of course, it was go to the vending machine. Or I would always tell the person that I did buy those sandwiches from at that lunchtime, don't put the cookie in with my sandwich. I don't want it. I don't, because I'll put it in my drawer and then I'll eat it later. And sometimes he wouldn't give it to me and sometimes he would. And I'm like, oh, darn, he gave me the cookie. Now I have to eat it. It's because I didn't want to throw it in the
rude otherwise.
I didn't want to be rude and throw it in the trash. But then I started throwing it in the trash. I'm like, I'm not eating this. And it's something to remind anyone who's listening that you have to listen to your body and do those things that you think, okay, this is wasting food. And people even knew, like we were doing low carb and our neighbors gave us sugar for Christmas. They're like, I know you won't eat this, but Merry Christmas. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Just don't succumb to that work. The office thing is really hard. And a lot of people aren't going to their offices these days. I don't know about in your area, if people are back to the office setting yet.
Not really. No.
I know in Perth, it's very open still.
Perth is different. Perth is...
They've isolated themselves and worried about what they're going to do in the future because they can't always stay that way.
Yeah, I know. But, they're very, very able to just go about their lives over there. I'm in Melbourne and, of course, we had one of the longest lockdowns in the world here.
With the curfews and all, yes.
Yeah, and then we had, pretty much 60 days of no cases, and now in the last week or so, we've had a few more cases again. So, I mean, everyone's kind of doing it the best they can. But I love what you were saying about the feeling better. I mean, that is just... It's almost like, I can't tell you how many times I've heard it, and obviously I felt it too, but it's almost like I didn't realize that I was living in a brain fog. And, that starts to lift, and it's almost like anything's possible after that. There's stuff going on in our brains and our bodies that we are never going to know about, right? And you talk about tapping into that. Our bodies are incredible. But I think when you start to see or see how your body can function on this other energy, this fat and ketones, it's, I don't know, just anything's possible. It opens up to so many things. And I just say to my clients, it's okay to say to yourself, I could never not eat pasta, or I could never go till 3:00 without eating. That's fine. But what you got to start doing is just poking holes in it. Just poke holes in it. Just put it to the side. You can always come back to that belief if you want to. But if you put it to the side, just see what happens. And invariably, of course, changes happen. We start to see things exactly like you've said. Oh, wow. It's 3:00. I'm not even hungry yet. Like amazing when a food was just dominating. When you're on that blood sugar roller coaster, it dominates your thoughts because it's like, well, where am I going to be when the next meal, the hunger hits? I have to be somewhere because I can't feel, that hangry feeling. And it just takes a whole lot of thinking out of your head, doesn't it?
It really does. Doug always jokes about how he's had to bring food with me and stuff in case that hit, And I know people with severe hypoglycemia where they're like sick, vomiting, falling, passing out, very anxious and heart palpitations. I didn't quite get that far, but I did know that I needed to bring some food with me. Otherwise I was going to have a headache and I was going to start feeling sort of anxious, not at that level, but, much better. But when I meet people who had debilitating hypoglycemia that could barely leave their house, we had a gal, we met her in 2019. She's in our state of Michigan, I believe. And she came with another lady who'd been very active. She's a PA and also out there, physician assistant. And it changed her life. She was able to travel to Ireland 4 or 5 months after I met her. And she'd been probably about a year into her journey where she felt a bazillion times better than she had. And she had been asking for help. She'd been asking for help from people for a long time. Pain syndrome, back pain, as well as endometriosis and hypoglycemia that just literally made her vomit and pass out and shake and not be able to leave the house. And then she was able to go and travel to Ireland. It was like their honeymoon finally. She had been gotten married. and was able to go on a trek, and after a couple of days of a long flight over, and just quality of life that's changing for people is insane. So one thing I want to mention before we go, Doug really put his head down at the beginning of the stay-at-home orders here in California, and I'm so grateful because it had him focused and it gave him something to do, because we really didn't know March, April, May, June, until the 1st of July what we were going to do with our events, and then we did virtual event. But he started a nonprofit, and the nonprofit is called the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, and it supports all of these physicians and nurses and nurse practitioners and so many different areas of expertise as well that want to come together and learn and teach and raise awareness and have a community of people that they can go to. So we have volunteer committees that are talking about just that, awareness campaigns. What kind of materials can we get that will be created that can go into physicians' offices or clinics, go towards the colleagues of the doctors that don't understand what this colleague is doing, to bring awareness and educate, and also for the patients to bring, because you've probably heard many times you have people who come to you that their doctor doesn't understand. They might learn something from you. They might learn something from us. They might learn something from another online organization and say, I want to try this. I've seen it in the news. I've seen it in my grocery store. There's a book. There's food on. We have a local natural food store that says keto on a whole bunch of things now. Paleo, low carb. And they have a label under right next to the price tag. So people want to try this, and their doctor might not understand what it is. So there are resources on the metabolicpractitioners.org, Society of Metabolic Practitioners, and also on our lowcarbusa.org site, that the clinical guidelines is a big one. If somebody wants to really delve in, it's long and it's in-depth for someone to bring to their healthcare practitioner. If a doctor, physician, nurse, any of the clinical clinicians are watching, they can use those or share them with colleagues. And there's a lot of scientific research studies and papers that have been published that are on the site as a resource. Loads of other things like how to find a practitioner. Also, if somebody is looking for a specific area of care that they need, it's a growing list of people that's on both of our sites. Where if you want to search your area, search a specialty, search something like that, you can plug in and see it's a growing list international of if you need a healthcare professional to help you work through something. A lot of different things like that, and accreditation that where there's a little bit more validity in a society and accreditation for people to understand what metabolic health is and what does a metabolic health practitioner do, and the different ways that they can help people in their wellness journey. So
amazing. So that was Doug's COVID baby, was it?
It was Doug's COVID baby. That is for sure. Both of ours.
Yeah, on the Nutrition Network, they've talked about it, or you guys have talked about it through them. There's fantastic. What a great idea. What a great idea.
And the Nutrition Network, the courses are available on both our sites, but they're actually part of, and we have a certification process, so we can get Low Carb USA certified, and it's all Nutrition Network training. We have a sports nutrition program as well that's separate. And then under the SMHP, a lot of the training starts with or ends with, depending on where people have come from. If they've got a lot of clinical background already, they can do the ethics course through the Nutrition Network and then apply for accreditation and qualify for it that way. There's research pathway if they've done a lot of research, and then at least do the ethics course. But there's and then, the sports training with our friend, the National Association of Sports Nutrition. And then if they did the advisors course and put it together, they can get the SMHP accreditation as well. And then all of the LCHF for the clinical professional, and the advanced clinical ones, the 1, 2, and 3 core classes that they've got in the program. So they're working really closely with us and kind of bundle some of those courses together and make them available. There's so much work going on behind the scenes. It's fun. And I'm sorry, we're talking out everyone's ear off. So I don't know if we're good on time or.
No, we're good. We're good. I'm just going to say, so obviously I'll have all the links in the details below for people to check those out. And on your website, check both of them out. But I want to talk about the conference quickly before we finish.
Let's do that.
So firstly, what does BOCA stand for?
Oh, you know what? So our winter conference, our summer conference is here in San Diego, California, where Doug and I live. And there were many people who said, please come to the U.S., the East Coast of the U.S., because San Diego's West Coast. And I think people are probably similar in Australia, because I've heard people on the East Coast call like the Perth area the Wild West, and they don't necessarily want to travel that far or into the, So people on our East Coast also said, please come to the East Coast. So our winter conference is in Boca Raton, Florida, in the southeast of the U.S.
And I thought it was an acronym for something.
I kept telling Doug, and we have a marketing guy who now works for us. And I was like, maybe we should take Boca off, because people don't even know what that means at this point. We're not going to Florida. Obviously, we can't travel and we can't bring people together, and they can't all travel to go there. We're still calling it Boca. It's Low Carb USA Boca 2021. But it is our winter conference, and it is the winter virtual conference at this stage. It used to be West Palm Beach.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, you've kindly offered a discount code. So it's in a couple of weeks. And anyone listening, if you want to sign up, highly recommend that you do. If you want to use the special code that Pam's created for my listeners, I will have that in the details below as well. THEC, the Health Evolution Collective, all in capitals, and that will allow you to sign up with a 20% discount. But I'd love you just to go through some of the speakers. I know, obviously, I've seen our beautiful Belinda Fettke is speaking. Gary Fettke is going to be there. Dr. Ben Bittman, who I spoke to about 6 months ago, and just, he blows
your mind away with the information and the research that he's done. I cannot wait for his presentation. And
just a lovely human as well. Like, he's just such a lovely person. Like, yes, yeah. I just start here going.
I find that with the community in general, that's the other thing. Like, not only do I hear inspiring stories, but the people that we meet, like you, are such caring, giving people. And they're from all over the world, and they've come here often because they've had to heal themselves, unfortunately. And we're trying to reach more people before they get sick and try to learn some information. But quickly, we had a chance when we went to Australia to visit Doug's family, to visit Belinda and Gary in Tasmania. What a beautiful place. And they're the most kind, giving, generous, wonderful, loving people ever met in my life. They said, cancel your hotel and your rental car. We'll pick you up at the airport, and you're staying with us.
Oh, wow, isn't that lovely?
We had never met them, and we barely had talked to them, and we did not stop talking for days. So, and then we visited them the second time, and we had gone to Indonesia and brought them with us to a conference where someone who had wanted to put on a conference was teaching doctors in Jakarta. And we brought Belinda and Gary and Georgia Eade and Eric Westman with us. But the 3 days that we have planned in 2 weeks, Gary and Belinda are going to speak for us again. And many of your followers know them and the kind of things that they talk about. And Ben Bigman, like you said, Jen Unwin and Dave Unwin. I know you had mentioned them because you're very familiar with the two married GPs or Dave Unwin's a GP, and his wife have a practice in the UK and are so caring and giving and knowledgeable, and are going to talk about, Jen's going to be one talking about the addiction component, and Dave, they've both kind of made a conscious effort and decision to focus on hypertension and high blood pressure, because it's something that isn't often mentioned, how quickly blood pressure comes down when insulin is levels are lowered and blood sugar levels are lowered. So they really want to bring awareness to how beneficial nutrition choices are, metabolic health is to high blood pressure. So that's going to affect our heart health, right? And they really want to bring awareness to that. speaking of heart health, David Diamond is going to be speaking. He's worked a lot with Marianne Damasi there down in Sydney, talking about cholesterol and statin awareness and heart health. So he's going to be talking about high levels of LDL cholesterol, low carb diet, and is it a risk, and what does the science say, and what does the research say? And he brings a really interesting clarity to some of the scientific researches that are quoted aren't really saying what people are saying they're saying, just because they're reading them wrong, and the absolute risk versus the relative risk, and bringing those little tiny numbers to light of it's not really that much of a percentage that it's helping people. It's really this much of what statins and lowering your LDL is really doing. That's our heart. We usually try to have at least one person speaking about heart health. Mark Cucuzella is going to be speaking. He's another beautiful human being who is in a very small town in our states in West Virginia that I think has the highest obesity rate in the U.S.
Wow.
They're just the food availability and the food awareness, and culturally the kind of food that, the kind of food that we get together and say is love, and we all should eat all of this comfort food. It's that kind of South. Let's see, what is he talking about? Glycemic excursion minimizations for type 2 diabetes remission. He works at a university. He was working in a small hospital. He has actually gotten his small hospital to cut out sugary beverages. He's gotten in with the dietetics department and made big strides in what they serve their hospital patients, which is such a big deal because it doesn't happen and hasn't happened enough, where diabetic patients are still getting a very high carb meal served to them when they're even in the hospital for high blood sugars. They're getting pancakes and with syrup, and that makes no sense.
No, well, here some of them will offer a choice for a low carb diet, but it's not low carb,
and it's not.
It's still,
no, yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
So let's see, and then we mentioned Brian Leskes and Trochalazian. They're doing amazing work. Brian has really become an advocate for his fellow physicians. He's talked about stress levels. He's talked about suicide levels. Last year in Denver, we got a chance to meet Rod Taylor, by the way, of Low Carb Down Under, finally in Denver. This past.
That was kind of the last. They just made that in.
Made it. We just made it over, and Rod got out of Australia and back in just in time.
Just in time. It was literally, we're all watching them going, because I knew a few people that were there, like, wow, are you going to be able to come back? It was like, touch and go. But
I was worried. I know. I mean, we're only a few states over, and I was like, well, we'll just rent a car if we have to and drive back. But we wanted to. A lot of speakers didn't come because they didn't want to leave and do that. As I mentioned, we're going to have the mental health and the addiction component. Ben Bickman. Ignacio Cuarta is another psychiatrist who speaks for us, and we met him at one of our first events. His dad keeps winning the raffle and free tickets to come back from Argentina, and we've invited him to speak for us a number of times now. He's speaks about psychology and the benefits of metabolic health for mental wellness. And
what's his name again?
Ignacio Cuarta, Cuaranta. He's another fabulous human being who just wants to help people. And then Adele Height's talk has not been mentioned. The title's not mentioned yet. The schedule's all on the event page when people come to our website and look. But she's a registered dietitian who got her doctorate, PhD in communications and rhetoric recently, and helped us develop the clinical guidelines. She has a fascinating story about meeting Dr. Eric Westman at a PTA meeting when their children all went together to school. And she ended up learning about low carb for herself, struggling weight struggles, and then started working for him, and then became a registered dietitian, understanding low carb principles. And then she was getting her PhD. She helped us develop the clinical guidelines that are on her site. So she's going to be talking about, I think, advocacy. She's very involved in the SMHP with us, and bringing awareness, raising awareness. What does public health, clinical guidelines, dietary guidelines, what do those all mean? Where do they have their place? and how can we come together as a community is what she talked about in Boca last year. What do we all have in common when we talk about nutritional and wellness, health and wellness, and low carb, and just bringing people together in the conversation, and some of the implementation. One person that we don't have this year that was last year, she really talks about what to eat and the nitty gritty of formulating a really good, diet and what not to eat, what to eat. Some of the things we were talking about, managing how you feel, eating what, cutting out what you can, and that kind of stuff. For a nutritionist, she's a dietitian as well. But anybody that I missed? Who did I miss? Dr. Ben. Oh, okay. We're almost on an hour, and I'm so sorry. But let me just really talk about quickly Dr. Ben Bakikio. So Dr. Ben changed our life and changed the course of our conferences. Not only do we have the mental health aspect and the addiction component always in, and heart health and diabetes and metabolic health as it relates to nutrition, but Dr. Ben has been doing exercise physiology for decades. He has a double doctorate in exercise physiology, but he's also been working in a clinical setting with patients for many, many, many years. Post-op cardiac surgery, post-op back surgery. But he talks about exercise, resistance training, that in combination with the low carb diet and fasting is a powerful combination for increasing insulin sensitivity and better metabolic health. To say briefly and quickly, slow maximum resistance training is the training that he has coined. It's SMART, SMART training. And even by itself, resistance training will activate pathways in your body as you bring your muscles to failure and you make them work really hard to release fatty acids, and those fatty acids give us energy and form the ketones when we talk about a ketogenic diet. They also increase muscle, and then your muscle is able to burn off glucose easier, store it or not store it, or store it and not store fat and use fatty acids. It's just a fantastic conversation that he always brings something really fascinating to the presentations. And he's funny too. He always brings a joke. So, okay, that's our 3 days coming up. I may have missed something. One more person, Amber Ahern, talking about carnivore diet. She's been in mental health.
Yep. Awesome.
For our first time finally having Amber, we've had many of her friends. She's attended many of our conferences, and she'll be talking about how meat heals, but a little bit more, complex and the scientific basis for a lot of it. That's our 3 days coming up, starting Friday the 15th, 16th, 17th. We'll be online. Everything is available to watch. If Australia's on a different time zone, you can catch it at a later time if you're not able to catch it right live. The day of, they'll be available in the evening, but all the replays will be available indefinitely. So all the recordings are available to watch. If anybody registers now and misses a few talks, or want to watch them after that week after or something like that. But I hope that whoever's listening and registers can try to join when they can live, because we have live Q&As. The presentations will be recorded just because that, reduces the problems with maybe possible technical difficulties from everybody being all over the world. We're all getting used to these Zoom and computer presentations, but just in case anybody has any Wi-Fi difficulties or audio difficulties or something, to reduce those, the presentations are sent to us in the next couple weeks, uploaded, and then they'll be played, and then they'll get on live for any Q&A for watch later. But I don't know if anybody had any questions. We're kind of running long, so
yeah, no questions. Just on people watching and taking it all in, and it's just been lovely listening to your story. And every time somebody shares a story, somebody gets something from it. I just know that to be true. I just, that's why I do what I do. And I love meeting people. I know this is probably as close as we'll get to meet for some time, but it's been such a pleasure listening to your story and getting to know you. And for what you and Doug do is just phenomenal. And we can't thank you enough for that. And the conference just sounds amazing. So everyone get on there, sign up. What a great group of people. And yeah,
we're all going to learn, come together, collaborate, ask questions, empower ourselves is the biggest thing. Empower ourselves, learn something that might help empower some other people that you can touch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pam. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for listening in.